sun was warm. The air was sweet with the scent of blooming trees. After years of dreaming, Derek and Maria had finally done it. Key in hand, they stood before their dream home at 657 Boulevard, their children buzzing with excitement beside them. But just 3 days after they signed on the dotted line, as Derek checked the mail, that dream began to unravel. Tucked amongst the bills was a thick envelope addressed simply to the new owner. The words inside started innocently enough. Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. But the warmth quickly turned icy. This wasn't a welcome note. This was a warning, a threat from someone calling themselves the Watcher. Suddenly, Derek realizes that his dream has turned into his worst nightmare. A nightmare that he and his family will not escape from. This is the true story of the nightmare that is 657 Boulevard and the chilling mystery of the Watcher. In 2014, Derek and Maria Brodus, looking towards a bright future for themselves and their 3 young children, decided to take the plunge and invest in a home, 657 Boulevard, located in Westfield, New Jersey, USA. Westfield residents would likely describe their town as a charming and safe area, the kind of place where a new neighbor leaving a welcome note wouldn't really be out of the ordinary. Just 45 minutes from New York, Westfield's slower pace is welcomed by about 30,000 residents, or at least it was at the time. It was even ranked as one of the most safe towns in the United States. 3 days after closing on their large, 6-bedroom house, Derek was finishing up an evening of painting and stepped outside to check the mail, never once suspecting that what he'd find would change his family's life forever. Accompanying a few bills was an envelope addressed to the new owner in thick, clunky handwriting. The typed note within offered a warm opening. Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood. However, the tone of the letter quickly shifted from warm and inviting to invasive and creepy. The author was clearly keeping tabs on the family. The letter pointed out the family's minivan and construction crews at the house. But the story gets far, far worse.
How did you end up here?
The letter read,
Did 657 Boulevard call to you with its force within? I see already that you have flooded 657 Boulevard with contractors so that you can destroy the house as it was supposed to be.
the person wrote.
Tisk, tisk, tisk. Bad move. You don't want to make 657 Boulevard unhappy. You have children. I have seen them. So far, think there are 3 that I've counted.
After asking the family if they had plans for more children, they exclaimed,
Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Better for me. Was your old house too small for the growing family? Or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me. Who am I? There are hundreds and hundreds of cars that drive by 657 Boulevard each day. Maybe I am in one. Look at all the windows you can see from 657 Boulevard. Maybe I am in one. Look at any of the many windows in 657 Boulevard at all the people who stroll by each day. Maybe I am one. Welcome, my friends, welcome. Let the party begin. The Watcher.
It was after 10 p.m., and Derek was totally alone. He ran throughout the house, turning off lights so that nobody could look in, and then he called the Westfield Police Department. After reading the letter, The officer asked Derek if he had any enemies and mentioned that he should cover the windows if possible, as they are a means to entry. Just imagine this was happening to you. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if I was in this position, the first priority would be to make sure my family was safe. Part of the letter stated,
I asked the woods to bring the young blood, and it looks like they listened.
Derek and his wife were in their 40s. That's not very young. Their children, however, that's another story. Derek immediately went back to his wife and kids, who were staying at their previous house in Westfield. That night, Derek and Maria emailed John and Andrea Woods, the people who sold them 657 Boulevard. They wanted to know if the Woods had any idea who the Watcher was and why were they threatening their family. The next morning, Andrea Woods emailed back. She said that just before they moved out, they too had also received a letter from the Watcher. She described the note as strange and said it also mentioned the Watcher's family watching the house for years. But Andrea said she and her husband had never gotten anything like it in their 23 years there, and just tossed the letter out without thinking much of it. That day, the Woods went with Maria to the police station. Detective Leonard Lugo told her not to tell anyone about the letters, not even her new neighbors, most of whom she'd never even met, and who were now all considered possible suspects. The next few weeks were tense for the Broduses. Derek called off a work trip, and whenever Maria brought the kids to the new house, she'd constantly call out their names if they went anywhere near the edge of the yard. Once, when Derek was showing a couple from the street the renovations, he suddenly felt a chill when the wife casually said, "It'll be good to have some young blood around here." Then, one morning, their contractor showed up to find a heavy sign he'd hammered into the front lawn had been ripped out overnight. About 2 weeks passed, and just as things seemed to normalize, Maria stopped by the house to check the mail. She immediately called the police.
Welcome again to your new home at 657 Boulevard. The workers have been busy, and I have been watching you unload carfuls of your personal belongings. The dumpster is a nice touch. Have they found what is in the walls yet? In time they will.
All over again, this family's life became a whirlwind of anxiety and fear. This time, the letter was directed directly to Derek and Maria, using their first names. Obviously, the Watcher had been busy. The letter bragged about how much the Watcher had learned about the family, especially their children. It even listed their 3 children in order of age, and used the nicknames that only Maria called the children by. The Watcher had been close enough to see the children playing in the yard, close enough to hear Maria call out to them, close enough to know Derek's first name. The Watcher had been watching, and this was only the beginning.
I am pleased to know your names now, and the name of the young blood you have brought to me,
the letter said.
You certainly say their names often.
The letter asked about one child in particular, whom the writer had seen using an easel inside an enclosed porch area within the house.
Is she the artist in the family?
The Watcher asked.
657 Boulevard is anxious for you to move in. It has been years and years since the young blood ruled the hallways of the house. Have you found all of the secrets it holds yet? Will the young blood play in the basement? Or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream. Will they sleep in the attic? Or will you all sleep on the second floor? Who has the bedrooms facing the street? I'll know as soon as you move in. It will help me to know who is in which bedroom. Then I can plan better. All of the windows and doors in 657 Boulevard allow me to watch you and track you as you move through the house. Who am I? I am the Watcher, and have been in control of 657 Boulevard for the better part of 2 decades now. The Woods family turned it over to you. It was their time to move on, and kindly sold it when I asked them to. I pass by many times a day. 657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession. And now, you are too. Welcome to the product of your greed. Greed is what brought the past 3 families to 657 Boulevard. And now, it has brought you to me. Have a happy moving in day. You know I will be watching.
The joy of the new house was completely gone. Derek and Maria stopped taking their children there and were now completely unsure if they'd ever actually live in the very place they'd struggled so hard to attain. "Where have you gone to?" the Watcher wrote in his 3rd letter a few weeks later.
657 Boulevard is missing you.
And even more disturbing than the letters themselves, the fact that the Watcher was clearly someone local. The letters had been processed in Kearney, the U.S. Postal Service distribution hub in northern New Jersey. The first one was postmarked June 4th, before the sale of the house was even public knowledge. A for sale sign was never even put up throughout the entire sale, and construction began just 1 day after the sale was final. Since the renovations were mostly inside, neighbors said they didn't notice anything particularly loud, not even the jackhammering in the basement. This implied the Watcher was paying close attention from a very close proximity very early on. But as you probably could have guessed, in a situation like this, where nothing physical has actually happened to someone, and there's such little evidence to point in any one direction, the police had their hands tied, and Derek was not happy. He became obsessed. He set up webcams throughout the house and spent nights crouched in the dark, waiting to see if anyone was watching from the street. And you can only imagine how this was affecting his family. Derek spent hours meticulously tracking when his neighbors moved in, calculating which homes were in earshot to his house, attempting to estimate who might have heard Maria yelling the children's names. The Broduses even hired a private investigator who stalked out the neighborhood and did background checks on the neighbors, all to no avail. Derek even went as far as to hire former FBI agents to take a look at his situation. Former agent Lenahan did notice some curious things about the letters. The envelopes were addressed to M.M. Brodus. The greetings included the day's weather, warm and humid, sunny and cool for a summer day, and the sentences had double spaces. All this to say that it would appear the author was an older writer. Lenahan didn't think the Watcher would actually act on these threats being made, but the letters had enough typos and mistakes to suggest the person was somewhat unstable. The first letter was dated Tuesday, June 4th, but that day was actually a Wednesday. There was also a clear anger directed at wealthy people in general, especially those new to that town. The Watcher was annoyed by new money moving into Westfield.
Are you one of those Hoboken transplants who are ruining Westfield?
The Watcher asked in one of his letters.
The house is crying from all the pain it is going through. You have changed it and made it so fancy. You are stealing its history. It cries for the past and what used to be in the time when I roamed its halls. The 1960s were a good time for 657 Boulevard, when I ran from room to room, imagining the life with the rich occupants there. The house was full of life and young blood. Then it got old, and so did my father. but he kept watching until the day he died. And now I watch and wait for the day when the young blood will be mine again.
Perhaps the Watcher's motive was jealousy, resentment that the Broduses had acquired a home that the writer couldn't afford. Because of this possibility, Lenehan suggested investigating former housekeepers or their descendants. You can only imagine the fear and anxiety that these poor people were dealing with. Sleepless nights, the nightmares and stress. Just imagine carefully scrutinizing every single person in the town that you live, watching and waiting for the other shoe to drop. The private investigator's search uncovered 2 registered child sex offenders living nearby, adding to the unease. Bill Woodward, the Broduses' painter, had observed something peculiar. The couple whose property backed onto 657 Boulevard kept 2 lawn chairs positioned unusually close to the Broduses' backyard. Woodward was looking out the window one day and saw an older man sitting in one of the chairs. He wasn't facing his house. He was facing the Broduses. Despite all of this, by the end of 2014, the investigation had hit a dead end. The Watcher had left no trace in the digital world, no fingerprints at all, and no way to connect anyone directly to the letters that could have been mailed from any mailbox in northern New Jersey. The letters themselves could be scrutinized for potential clues or dismissed as the incoherent ravings of someone deeply disturbed. It was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. That December, the Westfield police informed the Broduses they had exhausted all the leads and there was nothing else that the police could do. Eventually, the renovations at 657 Boulevard were complete. However, the thought of actually moving in overwhelmed the Broduses with anxiety. Could they feel safe letting their children play outside or invite friends over? Would a new, threatening letter arrive every week? Derek even looked into getting trained German shepherds for protection and posted a job online for military veterans. All they had to do was simply be present at the house all day. Despite these measures, the Broduses didn't want to feel like their family was confined, like they were prisoners in their own home, and they certainly weren't willing to knowingly put their children in harm's way. They were so joyous about their new home, and then within days, they were petrified. Bill Woodward, the painter, said, "I'm a stranger, and Maria was crying and shaking in my arms." Adding to their distress was the increasingly deranged tone of the Watcher's letters.
657 Boulevard is turning on me. It is coming after me. I don't understand why. What spell did you cast on it? It used to be my friend, and now it is my enemy. I am in charge of 657 Boulevard. It is not in charge of me. I will fend off its bad things and wait for it to become good again. It will not punish me. I will rise again. I will be patient and wait for this to pass, and for you to bring the young blood back to me. 657 Boulevard needs young blood. It needs you. Come back. Let the young blood play again like I once did. Let the young blood sleep in 657 Boulevard. Stop changing it and let it alone.
Having already sold their previous residence, the Broduses moved in with Maria's parents. Simultaneously, they continued to bear the financial burden of the mortgage and property taxes on 657 Boulevard, essentially maintaining a home they were too afraid to occupy. They confided in only a select few friends about the disturbing letters, leading others to question their delayed move. The constant stress led to frequent arguments, and both Derek and Maria began taking medication to aid in sleep. Facing significant depression, Derek and Maria sought help through medication and therapy. 6 months after the arrival of the letters, the Broduses made the difficult decision to sell 657 Boulevard. Their initial listing price was set higher than their purchase price to account for the completed renovations. However, the world of suburban New Jersey real estate is notoriously prone to gossip, and rumors had already begun to circulate regarding the house's continued vacancy. One real estate broker emailed to express her client's love for the property, but also noted the numerous, unsubstantiated rumors flying around, prompting a request for more information. The Broadduses provided a partial disclosure about the letters to potential buyers and informed their realtor of their intention to share the full letters with anyone whose offer was accepted. Several initial bids came in significantly below their asking price, but unwilling to absorb such a substantial financial loss, the Broadduses insisted on sharing the full context of the letters with only serious buyers. This stance prevented any offers from reaching that stage, even after they lowered the price. A Coldwell Banker agent who hadn't been privy to the letters advised them that they were being unnecessarily forthcoming, but the Broadduses remained firm in their decision. They were resolute in their refusal to allow the watcher to inflict the same torment on anyone else. A very admirable stance, in my opinion. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. As you might imagine, Derek and Maria had plenty of time to think about the situation and eventually came to the conclusion that the Woods couple who sold them the house was responsible for what was happening, believing that the previous owners should have disclosed the letter they received from the watcher in advance of the sale. The Woods informed the Broadduses that their recollection of the letter was that it was more peculiar than menacing, and that they never experienced feeling watched. However, the Broadduses' stance was that the letter that Woods received was sufficiently ominous to warrant disclosure to any incoming family. Consequently, on June 2, 2015, a year after purchasing 657 Boulevard, they initiated legal proceedings against the Woods, asserting that the Woods had a responsibility to reveal the letter, just as they had disclosed the issue of occasional water intrusion in the basement. In Westfield, the unsettling Watcher letters created widespread fear. Eventually, the news became widely spread throughout the media, and many of the neighbors were confounded as to how a thorough investigation could have ever been done without talking to all the neighbors within proximity to the home being interviewed. It was obvious that the police and their so-called investigation did not give this poor family the attention they deserved. Even the neighbors were able to see it. And so under the pressure of national attention, a veteran detective in the Westfield Police, Baron Chambliss, was asked to handle the case. After Chambliss began to review the case, he was able to uncover the DNA analysis of the envelope, which pointed at a woman being the one who handled it. They hired a security firm for handwriting analysis and a forensic linguist. Unfortunately, there were no matches found. Chambliss and the police were back to square one. A year later, fresh leads were scarce, and a crucial detail had been missed in the initial investigation. Another family on the same exact street had received a similar letter from the Watcher around the same time as the Broadduses. This family, who were long-term residents with grown children, had discarded the letter, mirroring the Woods' actions. Their confirmation of a similar letter after the news broke only deepened the mystery. Late one night, Chambliss surveilled the Broaddus home. A suspicious car stop led him to a young woman whose boyfriend lived nearby and was reportedly obsessed with a dark video game where he played a character called the Watcher. Chambliss theorized that the girlfriend could be the source of the female DNA. The boyfriend, living elsewhere, agreed to interviews, but never appeared. Lacking sufficient evidence, and with media attention waning, Chambliss closed the case. As the Watcher mystery lingered, some Westfield residents struggled to reconcile the sinister letters with the town's idyllic image. Initially, neighbors gathered, speculating if the Brodus family themselves were behind the letters, perhaps due to the buyer's remorse or financial issues, even suggesting insurance fraud or a movie deal. This theory persisted despite the Broduses denying such motives, and a police DNA test clearing Maria. The public's skepticism grew, fueled by the Broduses' delayed move and continued renovations. Some locals and online commenters openly questioned the legitimacy of the letters, suggesting a scam to defraud the previous owners. The Broduses, longtime residents with deep community ties, were shocked by the accusations. Just imagine so much being taken from you, and then all of a sudden, your whole town turns their back on you and accuses you of lying and manipulating. I cannot even fathom the pain and heartache that these people went through. Derek felt some in Westfield preferred a conspiracy theory over acknowledging a potential threat within their seemingly safe town, a denial rooted in their belief that nothing bad happens here. The Broduses became outcasts, estranged from their new home, and viewed with suspicion by some in their town. While Derek wanted to leave Westfield, Maria insisted on staying for their children's sake, refusing to let the Watcher take more from them than they already had. 2 years later, they bought a second home in Westfield and went through great lengths to keep it quiet. Despite staying, the fear remained, impacting everyday life, such as Maria constantly having to track their children while still under fire from the town who was talking up Westfield's safety. The Broduses still needed a plan for 657 Boulevard. A judge dismissed the case against the Woods family. In the spring of 2016, the Broduses relisted 657 Boulevard, hoping the public interest in their home would find them a buyer. While the open house was popular, every potential buyer who read the letters after expressing interest ultimately withdrew their offer. Demolishing 657 Boulevard was suggested to the Broduses, as the land itself was valued around $1 million. However, the town board unanimously rejected this idea, and a New Jersey judge later on upheld this decision. Derek and Maria were devastated, especially since even demolition wouldn't have fully resolved their financial losses. Besides the mortgage and renovation costs, they had paid roughly $100,000 in property taxes to Westfield, and a similar amount investigating the Watcher and managing the house. Maria expressed her deep connection to her hometown and her disappointment that her community seemed to prioritize the house over their well-being during their ordeal. Adding to the grief, Maria's father had recently passed away unexpectedly. Derek and Maria's priest, who had previously blessed their house, noted his surprise at neighbors who dismissed their experience as a hoax, feeling the human aspect of their story was lost. Ironically, while the Watcher aimed to protect the street from change, it had ultimately created division. Shortly after the planning board's refusal to demolish the house, the Broduses received welcome news. A family with adult children and 2 large dogs agreed to rent 657 Boulevard. The renter informed the Star-Ledger of his lack of concern regarding the Watcher, although his lease included an escape clause should another letter arrive. 2 weeks later, Derek visited 657 to address a squirrel infestation in the roof. The renter gave him a newly arrived envelope containing a letter that stated,
"Violent winds and bitter cold to the vile and spiteful Derek and his wench of a wife, Maria."
This letter, arriving 2.5 years after the Watcher's initial appearance, was unexpected. It was dated February 13th, the same day the Broduses provided depositions in their lawsuit against the Woods.
"You wonder who the Watcher is? Turn around, idiots."
The letter stated.
"Maybe you even spoke to me. one of the so-called neighbors who has no idea who the Watcher could be. Or maybe you do know and are too scared to tell anyone. Good move.
This letter was angrier and less refined than previous ones, suggesting the writer was closely following the events that were unfolding. They've referenced the media coverage.
I walked by the news trucks when they took over my neighborhood and mocked me.
The letter also mentioned Derek's secret surveillance.
I watched as you watched from the dark house in an attempt to find me. Telescopes and binoculars are wonderful inventions.
And it even noted the demolition attempt.
657 Boulevard survived your attempted assault and stood strong with its army of supporters barricading its gates.
The letter declared.
My soldiers of the Boulevard followed my orders to a T. They carried out their mission and saved the soul of 657 Boulevard with my orders. All hail the Watcher.
Even the renter was mentioned in the letter. While unnerved, he agreed to remain if the Broaddus's installed security cameras. The letter even hinted at various forms of revenge.
Maybe a car accident. Maybe a fire. Maybe something as simple as a mild illness that never seems to go away, but makes you fall sick day after day after day. Maybe the mysterious death of a pet. Loved ones suddenly die. Planes and cars and bicycles crash. Bones rake.
All of a sudden, the family terror had returned. However, this new letter also represented potential fresh evidence that could reignite the stalled investigation. Derek brought the letter to the police station, where a detective outlined a 300-yard radius around the house on a map, implying the Watcher resided within that area. Despite the Broaddus's continued efforts, law enforcement still lacked concrete leads. The Watcher could conceivably be anyone. Was it the elderly man in the backyard, the postal carrier on their route, even the neighbors with whom they socialized? Whenever the Broadduses noticed anything unusual, they provided new names to the investigators. Yet, their deepest fear remained that the Watcher was someone entirely beyond their suspicion. In March 2019, 5 years after the Broadduses invested over $1.35 million in 657 Boulevard, they were compelled to sell it at a considerable discount. Ultimately, a young local family bought the property for $959,000. This sale represented a loss of approximately $400,000 for the Broadduses, a figure that excludes the considerable sum spent on agent commissions, property taxes, utilities, and home insurance. It also excluded renovation from contractors and the fees for legal counsel and private investigators to solve the unsettling mystery. Just prior to the sale, Derek made his 60th mortgage payment of $5,495.13 for a house his family had never been able to call home. As the sale closed, the Broadduses sent a note to the new owners via their real estate lawyer, expressing their hopes. "We wish you nothing but the peace and quiet that we once dreamed of in this house." They also included a copy of the Watcher's handwriting in case any new letters surfaced. So far, their hopes for quiet for the new owners have been met, as no new letters have appeared at the time of making this video. And surprisingly enough, even though there was an extensive Netflix docuseries detailing the situation at 657 Boulevard, any money brought in still paled in comparison to the losses that the family incurred on the house. But time heals all wounds, right? Or maybe the saying should be, time heals all wounds for some. While the town of Westfield's real estate market is booming, and the residents of the town have all forgotten about the Broadduses and the Watcher, Derek and Maria will likely never be able to shake the trauma that they have endured. The Watcher was obsessed with 657 Boulevard, and in turn, Derek became obsessed with the Watcher. It's like a cancer, Derek says. We think about it every day. The final letter?
You are despised by the house, and the Watcher won.